Han Yu-jin walked confidently toward his troop, thinking, that future no longer exists. It's as if it never existed. Walking with his incredible team that he had found in this new world that he had managed to create, he entered the dungeon gate and spoke. Then I believed it. After walking from the gate to the dungeon, and once inside, Park Aram exclaimed in amazement, "Wow." Yu Mengwu was also surprised by what he saw here. As the hunters looked around, they saw that they were surrounded by incredible views, with mountains and forests decomposing into a beautiful landscape. And then Aram spoke, "This is the dungeon!" Standing on the mountain, all four of them looked around, admiring what they saw in front of them. They had not expected to see this. Walking forward, Park Aram said enthusiastically, "This is the first time I have seen such a landscape. It's like another world. I wish I could take a picture." Hearing this, Han Yu-hyun drew his sword and said to his comrades in a stern voice, "We are not here to have fun." Pulling out his sword, Han Yu-jin used his weapon skill to spread flames on the blade and said, "Don't give in to the camping mood. You should rather move away." As soon as the group leader said this, he immediately swung his sword and launched an attack in front of him, which cut through everything in its path. Seeing what had just happened, all three of them who had been following Han Yu-hen were stunned and froze in place in surprise. Looking forward, at the very spot where the attack had come, Han Yu-hyun heard an incomprehensible and surprised, "Eh?" as he tried to figure out why it was done. But the next second, when Han Yu-heng's attack reached its endpoint, everything ahead of him was immediately engulfed in flames, and black smoke filled the incredible landscape. After that, Park Aram ran to the front and exclaimed in displeasure, "What is this? You're setting fire to everything here for no reason. What do you think you're doing?" Seeing that she was extremely upset, Han Yu-jin tried to calm her down, but she continued, "Haven't you heard of environmental protection? If you're not happy with something, just say so." Interrupting Park Aram's exasperated shouts about the destruction of such beautiful scenery, Han Yu-jin said, "Geez, Aram, it's not like that. Look over there." When she looked to where Han Yu-jin was pointing, she was surprised. There were monsters hiding there? As Han Yu-hyun sheathed his sword, he said in a calm tone, "From the outside, it is impossible to assess the situation and know if there are monsters. Therefore, the strongest hunter of the group will take the lead and be responsible for this." Han Yu-jin looked back at his trainees with a stern look and asked them in surprise, "Didn't you learn these basic skills in your theory classes?" Hearing Han Yu-jin say this, Park Aram said in embarrassment, Oh, that's right, of course they taught me. I just don't have the area attack skill. If I did, I would be even stronger." Han Yu-jin looked back at the girl and spoke to her. "That's right, Aram. When you level up, you will have it too." Hearing this, the girl exclaimed in surprise, I can get a skill." Hearing that she did not know about this, Han Yu-jin said to the girl in disappointment, "You really didn't listen to the lecture. The level is raised by destroying monsters. After every 10 levels, one new skill appears." After saying this, Han Yu-jin added, opening his skill menu, "This is what we came to practice, but it is impossible to predict which skill will appear." Looking at the girl who was looking at Han Yu-jin in disappointment, he thought, "At least I can choose it." And then a system window appeared, saying, "Select the desired skill for the Park Aram object." Looking through Park Aram's skills, Han Yu-jin took a moment to look through all the available skills, finally found the right one, and thought, "Got it! This is it." Looking at the girl, Han Yu-jin thought, "The Ice Witch's characteristic area attack skill, Park Aram, I'll choose it." After which, a notification then appeared, "Pale Rain." Setting the object of Park Aram to receive this skill, Han Yu-jin walked over to the girl and spoke to her after setting her to receive the skill. "I feel like you're going to have a square attack. I can feel it." To which she said happily, "Hey, really? I'll quickly level up to the 10th level and help my uncle level up." Han Yu-hyun muttered in displeasure, "How can I help?" Hearing Aram's arrogant speech, Han Yu-jin said, "The amount of experience required to level up to S-class is not the same as F-class. S-class needs to gain 5 times more experience. Moreover, as the level rises, more experience is required." Having said that, Han Yu-heng added, "Even if you clear the entire dungeon, there's no way you'll be able to level up to the 10th level." After saying this, Han Yu-jin aggressively shouted, "I will help my brother. You, Miss Aram, take care of yourself." Hearing such loud words from his brother, Han Yu-jin was frightened. "Brother, be careful." Park Aram replied, "You've become very impudent lately." Starting over, they started to quarrel again, and then Aram began, "Is it so annoying that my uncle and I are so close? He is my guardian." To which Hen said, "I'm not being insolent. I'm just trying to make you feel like an S-class person." Park replied, "I completely understand that myself." Hearing this new quarrel, Han Yu-jin tried to break it up by exclaiming, "Hey, listen." But no one listened to him. Then Hyun spoke, "You say you understand, but you still stick to your brother?" Hearing Han Yujin say this, Park Aram said, "Then why did you follow him here and—" Han replied, "Do you think I wanted to keep my distance all this time out of a strong desire to keep my distance and? Grabbing both of them by the cheeks, Han Yujin interrupted their quarrel by exclaiming, "You two are at it again. Stop it." Han Yujin was angry with both of them and said in an angry voice, "What are you doing inside the dungeon?" To which Hyun, pointing to Aram, said, "Brother, but Miss Aram." And Aram also pointed at Han and said, "Head one." Hearing them continue to quarrel with each other and blame each other, Han Yujin said, "If you are only going to quarrel over me in front of me, both of you leave." Listening to this, Yu Mengwu said in alarm, "They're going to leave." As he began to scold the two of them for their behavior, Han Yujin asked his younger brother in anger, "Han Yu-hyun, why did you come to the dungeon?" To which he replied, "To help me practice." After hearing the answer from his younger brother, he asked the girl, "And you, Aram?" She replied in a panic, "Oh, hunt and level up." With an ominous look at the two of them, Han Yujin spoke to them roughly. "Then concentrate on ferociously killing monsters. F grades also need to kill a lot of monsters to raise 10 levels. After saying this, Han Yujin added, "Pretend to get along like you did during the interview. If you continue to fight, I won't even look at you anymore." Hearing Han Yujin's words, Park Yun-reem held out her hand to Yu-hyun and said, "So, let's be friends, Yu-hyuno." "Appa?" He replied, also extending his hand. "Okay, then I will also speak informally. Please take care of me, Aram." Having decided to become friends, Park Aram and Han Yujin shook hands. But it was not that simple. Even with such a simple action, they were in a competition for dominance. Watching this, Han Yujin sighed heavily and said, "Good, now try to really get along. We are still in the dungeon. Don't let your guard down, and give Mengwu and I a little help to climb the 10 levels." No sooner had Han Yujin said this than they both saw the silhouette of a monster rushing past them. Looking back, they both thought the same thing. Rushing after the monster, Park Aram, who had taken the lead, shouted frantically, "I'll get them, uncle!" Hearing Han Yujin shout out to Park Aram, Han Yu-hyun couldn't ignore it, and he too ran after the prey, saying, "Absurd! I'm the one who will help my brother." Watching what was happening in front of him, Han Yujin, filled with disappointment and lost hope, thought, a perfect alliance. A future where they get along. Running after the monster that rushed past them at that time, somewhere in the Shining Palace, two system administrators were standing, and one of them was speaking to the other. "Looks like he's entered the dungeon." To which the other replied, "Who?" Hearing the second system administrator's question, the first one's voice was heard in the palace again. "The one who turned back the clock." Hearing this explanation, the second administrator said to the first, "Really?" Hearing this, the second administrator approached the first and said, "Where? Quickly find it." To which the other said, "Wait a second, I'm looking for the dungeon." Hearing that the first system administrator had already started looking for the dungeon, the second said to him, "Hurry up. We can only interfere when he's in the dungeon." Seeing Han Yujin in one of the dungeons, one of the system administrators spoke ominously, smiling slyly. "We've been expecting you, my dear." Meanwhile, Park Aram was not holding back at all, and used her skills to the fullest to bring Han Yujin as much benefit as possible. After freezing a large pile of monsters so that she could give them to Han Yujin to kill to level up, Park Aram spoke, "Easy." Looking up at the two monsters circling in the sky, she exclaimed, "I will freeze them and bring them to you, uncle." In an attempt to spite Park Aram, Han Yu-hyun spoke to her as he tied the two goats together. "A glacier like this cannot pierce a spear, can it?" Meanwhile, Han Yu-hyun was doing something else. He was burning enemies and saying, "We need to burn the skin so that the spear blade can enter well." As Park Aram watched the monsters fall from the sky and gradually freeze, she exclaimed with joy, "Yes, they are breathing, so it will be enough to just cut them open. Uncle, brother." Standing there, watching the pile of monsters grow and grow in front of them, Han Yujin and Yu Myung-woo were shocked by the results. Observing the fighting methods of the high-ranking hunters as Han Yujin finished off the monsters, Yu Myung-woo said, "Frozen, roasted. They are both incredible." Looking at Han Yujin, who was busy doing something, Yu Meng said to him, "What are you doing?" To which he replied, "I need to collect magic stones from the slain monsters. How much does it all cost?" "Oh, those S-classes, they're scared out of their wits." Hearing Han Yujin say the phrase about gathering materials, Yu Meng-woo said, "Yeah." Standing on the monster, Han Yujin spoke to him. "Here, Meng-woo, you also need to swing." As he prepared to finish off the first monster, Yu Meng-woo asked Han Yujin, "Will I also get good skills if I work hard and level up?" Hearing this question from his friend, who was beginning to worry about his skills, Han Yujin said to him, "What are you even worried about? Of course not." Looking at his friend, Han Yujin paused, considering his characteristics. At level 10, there will be an SS class crafting skill, eh? So there was another condition for obtaining the skill? Let's see. No sooner had he looked into it than Yu Mengwu exclaimed wearily, it worked! My experience has increased! Looking at him, Han Yujin thought, what was that just now? As Han Yujin was also destroying enemies, he began to think with a strange thought. A mistake? A bug in the system? Is the description being written down manually? After finishing off quite a few monsters, Yu Mengwu exclaimed, I did it, the 10th level, but no skill has appeared yet. And then Han Yujin thought, then who is recording? Thinking about this, Han Yujin was deep in thought about the system and its secrets. Thinking, in the future, nothing was revealed about the system either. It changed the world. So many people thought it was a miracle from God. As Han Yujin thought about the system and all that it had created, he immediately thought that something was wrong and said to himself, but if it were a god, there would be no mistakes, right? After immobilizing all the monster enemies that came their way, Park Aram, deciding to move on, exclaimed, I think this is the last section. To which Han Yu-hyun added, are you doing well? How many levels did you climb? Hearing Han Yu-hyun say this, Han Yujin went over to his friend and asked him everything and exclaimed, Mengwu has gotten everything. I also have a little more to go. After saying this, Han Yujin immediately grimaced, exclaiming, what is this? To which Yu Meng asked him, what's wrong with you? But Han Yujin continued to look at the system signs that appeared. They read, found it. Oh, I'm sorry. Then Han Yujin, hearing Yu Meng's question, came to his senses and answered, no, there's something in the system window. And then muttered, I apologize. For what? As soon as he said that, he heard Park Aram and Han Yu-hyun running toward him in fright, saying, brother, be careful. The next moment, when the two S-class hunters had already run to him, Han Yujin began to shield him with his body, and Park Aram began to deflect the attack that was flying directly at him. After grabbing his brother to protect him from the sudden airborne attack, when Aram deflected it, Han Yujin spoke to his older brother. Are you okay? Are you hurt? To which he exclaimed in confusion, what's the matter? Han Yujin said this, surprised by the sudden attack, and made a guess. A monster boss? But a D-grade dungeon boss can't attack within this radius. Looking around him, Han Yujin spotted a strange monster and said in surprise, oh, originally the boss was completely different. It was supposed to be a huge mountain goat, but seeing what had just happened to the previous dungeon boss, how he had been quickly finished off by another monster by being lifted into the air, Han Yujin said, suddenly that bird appeared and it was him. Seeing what had just happened, Park Aram said in fright, what should I do? Wasn't the gate supposed to appear after the boss was killed? Han Yu-hyun answered her, even though he's dead, the gate doesn't appear. After saying this, he later added, that bird probably replaced him as the boss. In other words, looking at the monster, Han Yujin thought, I need to kill this monster to get out. Seeing a monster like this for the first time in his life, Han Yu-hyun took out a gate stone and held it out to Han Yujin and said, this is the first time I've seen it. I don't know how strong it is. Take it, brother. If the situation starts to escalate, at least you... Hearing what his younger brother had just said and handed him the teleportation stone, Han Yujin, remembering the story of his past life's battle with the dragon, said in a frightened voice, brother? Recalling the incredibly tragic ending that had occurred then, Han Yujin said in his head in alarm, is it really going to be the same this time, just like it was then? Remembering how he had tried to save his younger brother after he was wounded in battle and Jin had dragged him to safety, he thought, did a powerful monster appear because we didn't take safety measures in time? Thinking about it, he remembered how Han Yu-hyun had held out the teleportation crystal in the same way that time, and Han Yujin thought, that little brother of mine is alone. That little brother of mine is alone, just like then. Recalling how things had been in his past life, Han Yujin spoke to his brother, handing him back the teleportation stone. No, I don't need it. After looking at the monster first and analyzing it, Han Yujin looked at his brother and spoke to him confidently. It is weaker than you. Observing the monster's behavior, Han Yujin said, it is a second-class unusual bird species, the Mayan goldbeak. As you can see, it has the attribute of fire, and it's as high as the A-class high dungeon bosses. After saying this, Han Yujin continued to analyze the enemy. The beak is the main weapon. Its weak point is that compared to its spine and ribs, its head bones are fragile. It has several extra wings, so hit it directly in the head, not the wings. After listening to Han Yujin, Han Yu-hyun said to him, surprised, how do you know that? He replied, why, is it suspicious? Kill him first. We'll talk after we get out. After saying this to his younger brother, Han Yu-hyun, rubbing his sweaty forehead, thought as he looked at the monster, yes, this time we will go out together. Now is different from then. Thinking about this, Han Yujin bravely stood up and stood on the edge of the cliff, looking at the enemy and thinking, do you think that this time I will allow you to repeat the same thing as before? Deciding to take command of the operation, Han Yu-jin called out to the girl, "Aram, create a curtain with your breath." Hearing this, she exclaimed in surprise, "Ah, okay." Hearing her uncle's order, the girl immediately obeyed Han Yu-jin without another word and began to do as he said. The very next moment, she used her skill to activate her icy breath to create favorable conditions for Han Yu-jin to continue with his plan. When he saw that Park Aram had begun the first phase of the plan, Han Yu-jin shouted out to Han Yu-hyun, "I leave the damn bird to you, Yu-hyun!" To which he meekly replied, "Understood." As Han Yu-hyun prepared to go to battle with the bird, he said to Park Aram before leaving, "Please take care of him." The girl replied, "You don't have to worry about that." After hearing Park Aram tell him that he could go, Han Yu-jin returned and handed Han Yu-jin a stone with the words, "Still, I can't trust her, so keep the gate stone with you." Hearing that Han Yu-hyun still didn't trust her, Park Aram, who was standing nearby and had heard everything, called out in displeasure, "Hey!" After handing the stone to his older brother, the younger one went off to fight, only to hear himself being called after, "Got it, Yu-hyun? Aim for the head." Standing next to Han Yu-jin, Park Aram, who was creating a smokescreen, said, "Are you sure? I have the skill of flying." Han Yu-jin said to her, "You can't. You'll be burned alive." As Han Yu-jin watched his younger brother fight, he said, "Only a hunter with fire resistance like Yu Heng's can withstand the flames of the monster. Although he doesn't have the skill of flying, he has something similar." After Han Yu-hyun rushed into the fight with the monster, he deflected every attack the bird launched at him until he reached a certain place where it would be convenient to fight. After the enemy noticed that its attacks from a distance were ineffective, it realized that it needed to storm the hunter, and having gained enough height, it began to fall on Han Yu-hyun, pointing its beak downward. The next moment, the monster was already on the ground, and when it hit the spot where Han Yu-hyun was standing, it made a huge hole in it. If Han Yu-hyun hadn't dodged in time, the consequences would have been tragic. Having calculated his moves in advance, Han Yu-hyun, who had planned to bring the golden beak down to the ground, looked back and said, "Great, it's come down to the ground." Once the golden beak was within range of Han Yu-jin's attacks, he realized that it was time to act before the monster took to the air again. As Han Yu-hang approached the monster, he swung his sword to launch an attack and continued to fight with a serious expression on his face, keeping his cool. By maintaining his concentration in such a difficult situation, Han Yu-jin was able to inflict damage on the enemy, despite the fact that his body was quite strong. Watching Han Yu-hang fight, Yu-meng exclaimed in amazement, "Wow! Wings in a single stroke!" And Han Yu-jin shouted in alarm, "Hey, why are you aiming for the wings?" Noticing what Han Yu-hyun had just done, his older brother exclaimed, "I told you that doesn't make any sense at all. He has an addition." As soon as he said this, the monster spread its wings and flew into the air with lightning speed, leaving only a ghostly silhouette on the ground. Seeing that the enemy was no longer in front of him, Han Yu-hang was left standing alone on the battlefield, and the monster had already begun to attack from the air again. Standing at a distance from Han Yu-jin, who was fighting with the golden beak, Han Yu-jin said in astonishment in his mind, "Strange. Why is he doing nothing but standing on the ground?" Looking at his younger brother, who for some reason had not killed his enemy in one fell swoop, Han Yu-jin looked at Han Yu-hang in surprise and thought, he would have killed him in one fell swoop if he had gone upstairs and hit him in the head. Thinking back to Han Yu-jin's skills that he had used in the dragon fight, Han Yu-jin thought, instead of flying, he could use the blue leaves of the willow tree. Doesn't he already have this skill? That's impossible. After the enemy tried to attack Han Yu-hang again, but failed, he suddenly noticed that there were other people nearby. Noticing that the golden-billed bird had lost interest in him and was looking somewhere through Han Yu-jin, he turned back and realized who the monster was looking at. Seeing that Park Aram, Han Yu-jin, and Yu Meng-woo were standing behind him, and the monster was focused on him, he shouted out in alarm, "Brother!" Noticing that the enemy was now targeting them, Park Aram exclaimed, "Beat, brother! What should we do?" As she continued to use her skill to create a smokescreen, Park Aram saw the golden-beaked monster flying toward them and exclaimed in fright, "It's coming this way!" Looking at the monster, Park Aram asked in fright, "Will I be able to stop it with my breath? What should we do, uncle?" Clinging to Han Yu-jin, Yu Meng had already begun to cry out in fear again, saying, "Yu-jin!" Trying to break free of Yu Man's grip and throw him off, Han Yu-jin coughed and said, Wait!" Noticing that the enemy was targeting his comrades, Han Yu-hyun ran after the monster, gritting his teeth. As he caught up with the enemy, he used the blue willow leaf skill to trap it and prevent it from moving freely. After the skill enveloped the bird, it stopped, unable to move any further. Seeing what Han Yu-hyun had just done, Han Yu-jin exclaimed in surprise, He can actually use it. Then he can use it now. Is he?" Watching what Han Yu-hyun was doing, Han Yu-jin just stood there in a stupor, not understanding what was going on, and said, "What are you even doing there?" Shouting out to Han Yu-hyun to get his attention when he was just waving his arms, Han Yu-jin added, "Hey, what's that even? It's not used like that." Step on it! Hearing what his elder brother shouted at him, Han Yu-jin looked at him, not understanding what he wanted from him, and then he heard, "Leaves! Step on them and run!" Taking his older brother's advice, Han Yu-heng decided to see what he could do and began to step on the leaves, climbing them up and down as if they were stairs. Realizing another way to use this skill, Han Yu-hyun continued to walk confidently up the leaf and exclaimed, "Now I can do it!" Realizing that he could walk on the leaves of the blue willow tree, Han Yu-heng paced to the top to strike while dodging the monster's attacks. As he climbed up his self-made path from his skill, the monster, noticing that he was already a threat to him, fired a fireball at him to knock him down. Noticing that the fireball was flying at him at breakneck speed, Han Yu-heng had already reached the height he needed to strike, and he rushed at the monster and exclaimed, "Such flames are nothing to me." After jumping at the monster, Han Yu-jin was caught directly in the fireball that was flying at him, and pulling out his sword, he tried to dispel it by stabbing it. The moment the sword entered the fireball, it exploded, knocking everyone back a considerable distance. Noticing the explosion, everyone began to shield themselves from it so that it would not harm them. When Yumeng heard the explosion, he shouted out in fright, "Wah! An explosion!" Han Yu-jin said, "Hold on, Aram. Without you, we'll all die." After the explosion and the resulting blast wave, the golden-beaked bird also flew to the ground and fell to the surface with a loud sound. Having defeated his enemy, Han Yu-heng slowly began to descend, sword in hand, and walked through the leaves of the blue willow to his comrades. When he saw his younger brother walking toward them, who was not seriously injured, Han Yu-jin spoke joyfully, "Yu-heng!" Running to his younger brother, who had just defeated such a monster, Han Yu-jin called out to him, "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" To which he calmly replied, "Brother." Han Yu-jin ran to his younger brother and said, "Thanks to you." But the latter did not let him finish, but grabbed him by the shoulders and exclaimed joyfully, "Unbelievable, brother. How did you think of this? To use the blue leaves of a willow tree as a skill of flight." Hearing the astonished speech from his younger brother, who could not even fathom using his skill in this way, Yu-jin spoke to him. "Eh? I just always thought that you used it like this." Hearing this, Han Yu-heng said, "No, I had no idea. In any case, I was most sorry because I don't have the skill of flying, but you solved my problem." To which Jin replied, "Oh, is that so? It's nothing special." Meanwhile, a disgruntled Aryam stood nearby and thought, "He killed the boss, so I'll forgive him for once." Hearing his brother say that he didn't think his clue was anything out of the ordinary, Han Yu-hyun said to him, "What do you mean, nothing special? It's like I've learned a new skill." Looking at his joyful brother, Han Yu-jin thought, "Haha, if he's so happy about it, then good. It's like he was holding a birthday present and a Christmas present at the same time." And Hyun added, "It's all thanks to you. You really are the best." When Han Yu-jin saw the gate to the dungeon appear in front of them, he said as he left, "After we leave, I'll take another look at your other skills." Hearing this, Yu-heng happily exclaimed, "Really? Thank you, brother." Hearing this, Park Aram also didn't want to be left out and exclaimed, "Uncle, please look at mine as well." As they left the dungeon, all the observers immediately shouted, running to meet them, "Are you okay, Chairman?" After saying this, the practical exam managers added, "We were worried. The dungeon level suddenly changed." Han Yu-jin replied, "An A-class monster appeared there unexpectedly." Hearing this, the manager added, "What a relief that Park Aram is okay." Han Yu-hyun then said, "First, I need to contribute to the association." After leaving the dungeon, Han Yu-hyun thought as he ran away from the crowd, "Outside, it's better to keep my distance." After saying this, Han Yu-jin walked toward the place where he was supposed to return the equipment, thinking, "I'll return the equipment," but quickly so as not to catch anyone's eye. As soon as he thought about it, he heard a stomping sound near him. Turning his head to the left, he saw Kim Seung-han rushing toward him at breakneck speed, shouting, "Mr. Han Yu-jin!" Hearing this, he saw him fall at his feet. Then he realized that the mission of not drawing attention had failed. Then he heard from Kim Seung-han, "Are you hurt?" "I should have gone with you, Lord." Seeing that Kim Seung had just fallen, Han Yu-jin asked him in alarm, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" He immediately replied, "Get on my back. We need to get back quickly and rest." Hearing such a strange suggestion from Kim Seung-han, Han Yu-jin waved his hands and said, "I'm fine, I told you." Noticing that everyone was so happy to see him, Yu-meng was very upset that no one had even mentioned him. After returning home, Han Yu-jin, who had been in town on business, came into the room and said, "I'm here, Yu-hyung." When Han Yu-jin noticed that there was a bag of drinks and snacks by the table, he was amazed. "I brought snacks from the administration. It looks very expensive." As Han Yu-jin came closer to put the shopping bags down, he heard no response to his greeting, but he did hear a noise from the shower, and then he spoke up. "Washing. He got a lot of blood from the boss recently, deciding that he still had some time to spare. Han Yujin went to the backyard where his pet was to play with him. As he walked toward the fiery lion cub, Han Yujin said, "Then, while I'm waiting for him," once inside, Han Yujin said, "We need to play in peace. You are doing well. We... KH." As soon as he said this, the pet rushed to his master, whom he missed very much. Taking out his belt to play with the lion cub, Han Yujin threw the other end to him. Flying around the lion cub, Han Yujin exclaimed, joyfully, "I love you. Peace." Later, when they finished playing, Han Yujin went to the place where the bowl of food was. He brought it to the animal, set it down, and as he watched it eat, he said, "I love you, Peace." As Han Yujin lay tired on the ground with the fiery lion cub on top of him, he said with a heavy voice, "Has the superimposed effect of education been enough? Ugh, I'm dying." After saying this, Han Yujin looked up at the ceiling and said wearily to himself, "Ah, that's right. Today I thought I was really going to die." Recalling his adventures today, Han Yujin said, "There were too many strange things that happened today. There were errors in the system, and the fact that she seemed to be talking to me through the chat window." Recalling how the golden-beaked bird had appeared, Han Yujin said thoughtfully, "Something strange also happened in the dungeon. A high-level monster suddenly appeared out of nowhere." Thinking back to his past life, Han Yujin said in concern, "This kind of thing rarely happened in my future." As Han Yujin thought about what could have happened and what had actually happened today during the dungeon clearing, he became very anxious. Noticing this, the lion cub looked at him in surprise and mewed to attract his attention. As Han Yujin continued to think, he began to bite his nails and thought anxiously, "Is it really? Is this all because I turned back time?" Seeing that the fiery horned lion cub was getting nervous because of his master's anxious behavior, Han Yujin reached out to pet it and said, I'm sorry. He thought something broke because of the backslide. Thinking about what exactly could have happened and how going back in time could have affected the present, Han Yujin suggested, "That's why phenomena that appeared somewhere in the future are appearing now. If the system personally spoke to me through this," after thinking of many scenarios in his mind and the possible outcomes that could happen if he went back in time, Han Yujin said in a worried voice, "Yeah." But later, his anxiety disappeared, and he exclaimed, "It's none of my business! I should have explained everything properly from the beginning. And anyway, this system is too unfriendly." Going to his skills section, Han Yujin clicked on the ideal educator skill and said, "It's the same with skills. Although the explanation is detailed, it's a code word." As soon as he clicked on his skill and expressed his dissatisfaction, his system window disappeared, and instead a journal appeared in front of him. Startled by this development, Han Yujin crawled backwards and said in alarm, "Well, what's wrong with the system window?" Meanwhile, on the other side of the system, a voice was heard, which was also heard by Han Yujin. And after the log appeared, it said, "Is the connection stable?" Sitting in front of the system center, 3 of the chief system administrators stood side by side, and one of them spoke. "Our contacts are too limited in time. We forced the channel open, so there's nothing we can do." After saying this, one of the system administrators added after he had said it, "We probably should have explained it in more detail." After suggesting that more detail was needed to explain exactly what was going on, one of the administrators continued, "But we have to hurry. You have to figure it out. We tried to make it as intuitive as possible." As Han Yujin looked through the journal that the administrators handed him, which included Han Yu-hyun and Park Aram, he heard the last thing, "And you've shaped it into a form that is familiar to your world." Evaluating his appearance after hearing everything from the administrators, Han Yujin said in surprise, "What is this? A yearbook? It looks like it was made for a kindergarten." Han Yujin looked at the strange design of the magazine and the strange design of the magazine and said, "What is going on here? What is going on in the mind of the creator of the system?" After saying this, Han Yujin read out what he had seen. Objects with a completed nurture effect overlay? Only S classes are counted? Judging by the fact that Myung-woo and Kim Sung-han are not here, it seems so. Looking at what else was interesting, Han Yujin began to count all the boxes that had to be filled in, and after counting most of them, he said, "And there are only 49 windows. 50? Good luck?" Hey, this is... Han Yujin didn't hear Han Yu-hyun open the door and step out of the shower as he was looking at the magazine. Wiping his head with a towel, Han Yu-hyun said in surprise, "Brother, you're already here? I'm sorry. It took me a long time to clean up." Looking at how many different high-class hunters he needed to find and make into his pets, Han Yujin was shocked. Noticing the elder brother on the floor, the younger one spoke to him in surprise. "What's wrong with you? You look pale." Hearing this from his younger brother, Han Yujin looked at him and said sadly, "Ah!" And then he thought in a panic, "They want me to tame 50 S-class people?" After these events, they spent a nice evening relaxing, drinking, and having a good time. The next day, Han Yujin and his pet found themselves at the training grounds in the guild's dungeon. After releasing the fire-horned lion onto the training ground, The guild prepared one mole monster to train the pet. As soon as it was released from its cage, it immediately attacked the lion cub. Watching the fire-horned lion cub deftly deal with this enemy in a matter of seconds, one of the observers said, "A feat of unicorns, a second-class fire-horned lion. Second day of training in animal taming skills." Moving the camera to the animal, which was licking its paws of its opponent's blood, the observer continued, "Current physical measurements, 51 centimeters in length, 5 kilograms, and 600 grams in weight." Seeing how quickly his animal had dealt with the monster and hearing its current characteristics, Han Yu-jin said, "In the past 2 days, it has grown twice as big." Dressed in a special protective suit to prevent his animal from being severely injured, Han Yu-jin stood near the camera and said, "Wow, well, a beast is a beast." When Han Yu-jin saw that his fire lion cub had already returned from training and ran into his room, he greeted him happily, stepping forward to meet him and saying, "Good job, The next moment, before he could finish speaking, and before he could enjoy his pet enough, the fiery lion cub pounced on Han Yu-jin again, knocking him down and pushing him back. After restraining his cub's heavy leap, Han Yu-jin said in embarrassment, "Hoo-hoo, it's nothing. After all, I rented all the possible equipment to increase my endurance and strength." As he said this, Han Yu-jin remembered what had happened the previous evening when they had been sitting together in Han Yu-hyun's room, drinking. While pouring whiskey into an ice-cold glass, Han Yu-hyun said to Yu-jin, "Beast ta mare?" Picking up the glass of drink, Han Yu-jin said, "Yes, I obtained this skill after I reached the 10th level." Looking into the glass, he saw that there was very little drink in it and said in passing, "Why so little?" Hen replied, "It is not good for you to drink too much," and then said, "And what does it do?" As Han Yu-jin raised the glass to his mouth, he thought, "It's better to hide behind a new skill. I still can't tell him about the tutor skill." Then he spoke, "It's a skill that allows me to influence beasts, to tame them. It's an S-class skill, so I can use it on high-level monsters." Hearing this, Han Yu-heng grabbed the rope and spoke to Han Yu-jin, "An S-class skill in an F-class body in such a dangerous world. Moreover, a unique skill?" Hearing this, Han Yu-jin looked at his anxious brother with the rope and spoke to him. Hey, are you thinking of imprisoning me again?" Han Yu-jin then added, "God, instead of hiding it, we need to find a use for it." While he was saying this and having a dialogue with his brother, the fire-horned lion cub was trying hard to get a treat from the plate on the table. Suggesting that he develop his skill, Han Yu-jin said, "I can raise Mir into a riding beast for you, and I can raise more of the same beasts for you. How many other S-class hunters need high-level riding beasts? Just imagine how things will change dramatically if the high-level abyssal hunters get them. Just think of what it would be like to explore all these vast dungeons on horseback, instead of on foot." Looking at his elder brother, who was trying hard to convince him to unleash this skill and use it in a wide range, Han Yu-heng heard, "Thanks to this skill, the course of dungeon clearing will change greatly." Noticing that his apprentice was trying hard to get the goodies, Han Yu-jin thought, "Fortunately, Mir has already been under the effect." And grabbing the treat, he threw it to the lion cub, calling out, "Catch!" Imagining how strong Mir would become in the future, and how Han Yu-jin would train and develop him, the boy thought, "If the system wants me to raise 50 S-classes," he imagined going for evening jogs with his fiery lion cub, with extra weight strapped to his back to increase his efforts. "Then it will be better to train monsters than to brainwash people." When he said this to Han Yu-hyun, Han Yu-jin did not realize that it would be much easier to say than to do. During the next training session with his student, Han Yu-jin fell exhausted to the ground, saying, "I am dying." As Han Yu-jin lay exhausted on the ground, shedding tears of frustration, he said, "World, are you not tired?" The latter mewed in surprise, not understanding why his master was lying there exhausted. Han Yu-jin continued to lie on the floor to rest, and said, I never thought that I would have to exert so much effort for this fish from the pond. But the more horseman hunters appear, the more effective the sweeps will be. The fewer dungeon breakouts there will be, the safer the world will be, especially if you consider that over the years there will be more dungeons, and they will become more dangerous." As Han Yu-jin lay on the floor playing with his pet, he exclaimed, "My conscience just won't let me relax and play around like this." As Han Yu-jin was playing with his pet in the training room, he suddenly heard a very familiar voice coming from above him and said, "Unbelievable, Mr. Han Yu-jin." When he opened his eyes, he saw the head of the Human Resources Department, who continued, "Your internship has only recently ended, and you're already training at full strength here." Han Yu-jin immediately stood up and said in concern, "Wait, Yu-hyun said I could use this room." Seok Shumeng replied, "I'm not here to kick you out, don't worry." After reassuring Han Yu-jin that he could stay here and practice in this room without any worries, Seok Shumeng, looking at the lion cub in detail, said, "By the way, it's really beautiful." Turning his attention to the fiery lion cub sitting next to him, the HR manager continued, The beast has grown so much in just one day of training. Greatly surprised by this significant increase in the animal's progress, Seok-Shu-man immediately bowed to the young man and exclaimed, "I am not just inspired." Mr. Han Yu-jin, startled by this behavior from such a high-ranking person in the guild, Han Yu-jin took a few steps back and said in alarm, What has suddenly gotten into you?" Hearing Han Yu-jin's question, Seok Shim-young replied, "I apologize for being rude to you all this time and underestimating you. But you have shown such potential and analytical skills. And your new skill." After saying this, Seok Shu-man immediately threw his arms around Han Yu-jin. The boy, in turn, tried to pull away and shouted, "Hey, stop acting like that! Get off me!" Without letting go of Han Yu-jin, but clinging to him even more, the HR manager said to him, "Please join the abyss and become a fresh breeze in the world of hunters." Han Yu-jin tried to pull away from Seok Shu-man, but he said, "I won't! I can't! I don't have the ability to do that." Shu-meng replied, "We need your strength, Mr. Yu-jin." Observing what was happening between Yu-jin and Shu-meng, the lion cub compared their behavior to Jin's playing with himself while playing with a rope. Yu-jin, trying to escape, thought, "My insight is bullshit. I just don't know all the answers from the future." Recalling how it was in his past life, Han Yu-jin thought, "What's more, I hate this guy. I don't want to have anything to do with him. Every time I went to the abyss, I was only angry and frustrated because of his poisonous remarks." After letting the boy go, the head of the personnel department stood there and tried to convince Han Yu-jin to become the new commander of the abyss once again and said, "Please think again, Mr. Han Yu-jin." Trying to persuade Han Yu-jin, the head of the personnel department said to the boy, "We will provide you with everything. Air transportation for the monster babies, food, training equipment, and anything else you need. Just ask." Hearing Seok Shi-han say that, Han Yu-jin immediately thought of something interesting. "Oh, right. None of those things happened in this life. Seok Shu-man just doesn't remember all the shit I got into." Realizing that he was a much more important person in this world, Han Yu-jin immediately put on a haughty expression and thought, "Now I am in charge." And then said, "I don't need anything." Hearing this, Seok Shu-man spoke to him. "Mr. Han Yu-jin." He took a smug pose and said, "Yu-hyun said he would pay for all the embezzlement anyway." After saying this, Han Yu-jin did suggest one favorable deal through which he could start cooperating with the guild, saying, "Well, since I've already used your dormitory, I wouldn't say I'm not willing to sign a contract." Hearing that Han Yu-jin was willing to cooperate by signing a contract, Seok Shi-min immediately took out a digital contract and said, "In that case, let's sign it right now." Han Yu-jin sat down and stroked his pet. "Not as a hunter, but as an ordinary employee. I want to remain an independent hunter." Grabbing his pet in his arms, Han Yu-jin exclaimed happily, "This way I can freely raise animals for other guilds and make a lot of money." Seok Shi-meng replied, "Mr. Yu-jin, this is for the future of the abyss." After saying this, Seok Shi-han lowered his head when he heard Han Yu-jin's response, and he replied, "Oh, it has nothing to do with me. And the abyss isn't the strongest guild in the country anyway, so you simply won't be able to pull off an exclusive contract with me." Holding his pet in his arms and cracking up, Han Yu-jin said, "I don't even know how valuable the skill of a magical beast tamer is. However, thanks to this skill, clearing dungeons can become much more efficient." Comparing himself to a rare character in a fairy tale, Han Yu-jin said, "For high-level hunters, I'm like a hen that lays golden eggs. And the abyss wants to take this skill into its own hands? How will the other guilds react to this?" Saying this to tease Seok Shu-meng, Han Yu-jin continued, "Many people are willing to use force if they can't get something. I've even heard that some people are poisoned by putting poison in their food. I am an F-class, so I will definitely die in such circumstances." After describing his plight, Han Yu-jin added, "So wouldn't it be better for me to at least look independent? Something like, I'll raise one beast for each guild in exchange for immunity, but I'll also demand money." Holding his pet in his hands, Han Yu-jin said finally, "Of course I will raise Mira for you, so please hire me. Please take care of me and negotiate with the other guilds for me. It's too difficult." After saying this, Han Yu-jin continued to demand a lot more from Seok Shi-man to get back at him this time for all those times, and said, "And salary, and bonuses, and full social security." After hearing all of Han Yu-jin's demands, the HR manager just laughed when he finished and said, "Haha, it looks like I can't handle you. All right, Han Yu-jin." With that, Seok Shi-man walked over to the video camera and said, "Can I use the video of the training to negotiate with the other guilds?" Han Yu-jin replied, Yes, you take it." Taking out the video of Han Yu-jin's training with his student, the head of the Human Resources Department spoke to him. "There's one more thing I wanted to ask you." After saying this, Seok Shi-man added, "If Abyssal becomes the strongest guild in the country and no other guild can threaten it, in that case, Will you sign a hunter's contract with us? Hearing such a strange proposal from the head of the personnel department, Han Yujin thought for a few seconds and said uncertainly, I don't know. As soon as he said that, he immediately pointed his finger at Seok Shuman and said, You didn't try to record that just now, did you? To which Shimeng replied with a hiccup, I did. Then Jin added, What kind of person? Realizing that Han Yujin was not going to be able to get away with it, Seok Shuman headed out of the training room, but on his way out, he heard the following question from the boy. But what's in it for you if you hire me? Han Yujin cuddled with his pet and said, I will help you with my skill anyway. I have nothing else. Even if one day we do sign a contract and you regret it, it won't be my fault. Walking away from Han Yujin, Seok Shi-han, passing through a long corridor and far enough away that no one could hear him, said, I'm impressed. Thinking back to their conversation with Han Yujin, how he had made such demands in order to sign a contract with him, and at the end of it, he had said that there was nothing else but this one skill. Seok Shuman said thoughtfully, There's nothing else, right? Watching the video of Han Yujin training with his pet, the head of the HR department said with a sly smile, Looks like Hunter Han Yujin has some self-esteem issues, doesn't he? He keeps surprising me every time we meet. Han Yujin, after he had escorted Seok Shim-young out, began to play with his child and said happily, Yay! Salary! Social Security! Did you see how Seok Shuman stammered in confusion? Recalling how in his past life, when he was a nobody and couldn't do anything, he would come to Seok Shimeng and ask him for something, and he would refuse. Yujin said, People with unique skills think they are nobodies. Power spoils them and makes them arrogant. I've seen many such awakened ones. Han Yujin also seems spoiled. But he's different from them. He has a sober assessment of the future, and he was able to bring everything to a favorable negotiation. Reflecting on how incredible Han Yujin is now, Seok Shim-young spoke to him. Has he always been this gifted? Have I been blinded by his younger brother's genius and not noticed? Adjusting his glasses and thinking about how things should be handled, since it was his responsibility, the HR manager said, That's just assuming the possibility that Han Yujin would join the Abyss. Seok Shim-young thought, I've already thought about the fact that the Abyss will be pressured by other guilds if he becomes our hunter. Abyss was even willing to take that risk. After saying this, Seok Shim-young assumed another development based on how his conversation with Han Yujin went, and then he spoke, But if Han Yujin remains independent, it changes a lot of things. Reflecting on how Han Yujin would become famous around the world as a tamer of magical beasts, he continued, All the attention will be on him, not on the Abyss. Correlating all the information he had, Seok Shim-young said one interesting phrase, which went like this. A great benefit, but also a huge risk. Thinking about all the problems that might come Han Yujin's way, he said, Does he not realize their importance because he is so far removed from the world of hunters? After saying that, Seok Shiman adjusted his glasses and expressed his other guess by saying, Or is he even doing this to protect his younger brother? After saying that, Seok Shuman finally said, referring to Han Yujin, In any case, you will have the eyes of the 3 major guilds, and the world on you, Han Yujin. Meanwhile, some unknown person was lying on his chair in a luxurious hotel room, enjoying his position. The next moment, when he picked up a piece of paper with some information on it, this person said promisingly, How interesting. The photo showed Han Yujin with his pet. Looking at the photo, the man said, You will soon find out how valuable a card you really are. Meanwhile, Han Yujin built a corner for his pet to train and have fun. After finishing all the assembly work, the boy said with a sigh of relief, It's done! Your corner is ready, Mir. Seeing that his student appreciated what he had built, Han Yujin spoke to him. Do you like it? Now you will live with me in the dormitory. After saying this, Han Yujin spoke to himself. Won't it be cramped here when he grows up? In that case... Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Park Aram looking over his shoulder at the animal and exclaiming, Wow, uncle, who is this? To which Yu Meng said, Isn't that a monster? As she approached the animal, Park Aram said sweetly, What a cute little cat. To which Yu Jin replied, Aram, it's not a cat. Then Yu Meng shouted, Wow, Yu Jin, help me, it's biting me. Jin replied, Peace, it's not food. While holding his animal in his hands to prevent it from harming his friends, Yu Jin heard someone else come to them. He looked over and saw his younger brother and said, Hey, Yu Hyung, what's up? To which he replied, Do you have a minute to spare? Looking at his younger brother, who had addressed him in such a serious tone, Han Yu-jin immediately thought about it. Now, Han Yu-hyun stepped away from Han Yu-hyun and told him that Yu-jin was going to meet him soon. When he heard this, he exclaimed in astonishment, What? The guild leaders are coming here to meet with me? Hearing this surprise and his reluctance to meet with anyone, Han Yu-heng said to his elder brother, You can refuse. You don't have to meet them. To which Yu-jin replied, My God, how can I? Holding his pet in his arms and walking with his younger brother to the guest room, Han Yu-hyun said, "These are S-class hunters. Hunters of a lower class usually have a hard time dealing with them." He replied, "Well, you're quite right about that." After saying that Han Yu-jin would have a hard time dealing with them, he continued, "See? Then I'll just tell them to come back." Before he could finish, Han Yu-jin grabbed his shoulder and said indignantly, "Stop. How can you continue to behave like this towards the guild leaders? Think about how the public opinion will be affected by the fact that the leaders of the three major guilds personally came to the Abyss? Everyone will say, wow, Abyss is a big fish, isn't it? So why not meet with them?" Walking forward with confident steps, Han Yu-jin said, "And I need to meet them at least once." To which Hyun wanted to object by saying, "But," to which Yu-jin replied, "From now on, you're not allowed to talk in front of me, but, however, and however too." Putting his fire lion around his neck, Han Yu-jin said, "If we're going to negotiate, we need to see them in person." After saying this, Han Yu-jin entered the meeting room where the leaders of the three largest guilds in the region were seated. On one side was an old man, and next to him was a young man, most likely an assistant or manager. On the right side was another man, but this one looked more like a bully. Noticing these serious people, Han Yu-jin got a system notification. Fear resistance activated. Looking around, Yu-jin thought, what a serious pressure. Standing behind him, Han Yu-hyun spoke, "Allow me. I'd like to introduce you to Hunter Han Yu-jin." No sooner had Han Yu-jin been introduced to everyone present than the appraiser immediately approached him and said, "Please excuse me, but may I have your hand for a moment?" Hearing this, Han Yu-jin said, Why would you?" Holding out his hand to the appraiser, Han Yu-jin heard him say, "I need to test your skills before we start negotiating." Looking at the appraiser in confusion, Han Yu-jin said, "Ah." Realizing what was about to happen, Han Yu-jin immediately grabbed his hand and raised it up, shouting, "Hey! How can you safely grab an unmarried man's hand like that?" At which he said in confusion, "What?" Seeing this scene, Han Yu-jin thought, "Damn, a qualified appraiser has come with them. If he starts evaluating me, he'll definitely reveal my LNS grade skills, right? And if they find out that I don't have a taming skill, but an influence skill." As he approached Han Yu-jin again, the evaluator said, "I only need to stay for a moment. Just give me your hand." Han Yu-jin said in alarm, "How come?" The next moment when the appraiser approached Han Yu-jin again, holding Mir, he lunged at the man who was molesting his master. Stopping in front of his owner, protecting him from unwanted touching and the various effects of the skills, the animal heard Han Yu-jin say, "Mir?" Han Yu-jin calmed his pet down with the next phrase, picking it up and saying, "It's okay, Mir. It's not a bad person." When one of the guests saw the animal rushing to protect his master, he laughed with joy. Sitting at the negotiating table, the president of the Hunters Association said, "Did he recognize that they wanted to use the skill on his master?" Park Min-gyu, the head of the Hanshin Guild, replied, "He's still a cub, so he shouldn't be above C-class, but he's already so capable." Seeing this sight, a girl stood behind Han Yu-jin and spoke to him. "I think this fierce defense of the master will be enough. I think it will be enough to be considered as evidence." Standing behind him, watching the boy who was calming him down and holding his pet who was protecting him, the girl said, "I can't even make a difference with my suppression." After saying this, the head of the Destroyer Guild, Moon Hyun-ah, added, "Isn't that right, Mr. Magical Beast Tamer?" Pointing to an empty seat at the table, she said, "Please sit down. We can't make such an important person stand." Han Yu-jin said in fright, "Oh, thank you." Looking at the girl who said this, Han Yu-jin stood up and thought, "Huge! What a physique!" To which the girl added, "Who would have thought that the abyssal head has such an elder brother?" Sitting back down, Han Yu-jin continued to examine the beautiful lady's body and thought, "Are all S-classes like this? Will Aram also be taller than me one day?" Looking at the animal on Han Yu-jin's lap, Moon Hyun-ah said, "A fire-horned lion. When it grows up, it will be on par with an S-class dungeon boss, right?" Turning to the head of the Abyssal Guild, Han Yu-hyun, Moon Hyun-ah spoke to him. "What do you think, young master? If you happen to have kittens, will you give them to us?" Hearing this offer from the vice-chairman of the Destroyer Guild, Han Yu-hyun said with a smile on his face, "It won't be for free, but we can exchange one for a high-level, cold-resistant riding monster cub." Leaning on Han Yu-jin, the girl suddenly said smugly, "Huh, so you want us to get a riding beast for Park Aram?" Hearing this, another one of the guild leaders present expressed his displeasure, saying, "Aren't you being a little too cocky? 7 monster cubs and 1 high-level cub." After saying that, the bully man continued to express his displeasure at the Abyssal Guild's behavior. "The Abyss has already swept away all the cubs in the market." After saying this, the head of the CMC Guild, Choi Seok-wan, added to his earlier statement, "And you still demand a trade?" Hearing this objection from one of the leaders of the meeting, Han Yu-hyun spoke to him. You can always get one in the dungeon and then exchange it. Hearing this answer, Choi Seok-wan slammed his fist on the table and said, Oh, you're kidding me. You're literally telling us to give the abyssal beasts to the abyss if we want to have them ourselves. Aren't you being a little too hard on your brother? Immediately standing up and pointing at Han Yu-jin, Jung Suk-won exclaimed, We were supposed to negotiate with your brother as an independent person, but how do we know that he is not just paying lip service to independence? If this Han Yu-hyun is your brother, it is as if he is already a part of the abyss. After listening to all the bad language from one of the audience members, Moon Hyun-ah said, Chairman, that's enough. But Han Yu-jin stood up and said, I have only a partnership with the abyss. Rising from his seat and squaring his shoulders, Han Yu-jin said, They help me because I can't handle everything on my own. And this meeting was only possible because of them. After saying this, Han Yu-jin stumped the KCM chairman more and more, and added in the end, If I was only planning to help my younger brother raise monsters for the abyss, then what would be the point of me coming here? Stroking his pet, Han Yu-jin added, Besides, I have a certain limit to how many pet monsters I can raise at one time. As Han Yu-jin approached Choi Seok-wan, he reached out his hand and said, But if we can come to an agreement with you, your guilds will be among the first to receive riding monsters in the entire world, just like the abyss. Holding his pet on his shoulders, Han Yu-jin spoke happily. Isn't this a significant reward for these negotiations? Therefore, I am honored to see all of you here, dear customers. Hearing Han Yu-jin's words, the leader of the CMC Guild sat back in his seat and cycled unhappily. Hearing this, he thought, He's creepy. He seemed normal on TV. After saying this, Han Yu-jin continued his thoughts until a finger was poked in his face. I even had a crush on him because he was a member of the national soccer team before the awakening. Drawing the thoughtful boy's attention to her, Moon Hyun-ah spoke to him, putting her hand on Han Yu-jin's shoulder. Hey, little brother, I see that not only do you have good skills, but you also have a tongue in cheek. Turning his head to face her, Moon Hyun-ah said as she got close enough to him. I'm beginning to like you. Your younger brother is the head of the guild, you have a rising star in your care, and you have a cute cat. If I get you, will I get all this as a gift? Do you want to join the ranks of the Destroyer? Hearing this, Han Yu-jin said, Ha ha ha! I told you that I will not join anything. I'm not going to give in. I'm not selling out. She replied, You really don't sell out, not even to your brother? Standing very close to the girl, Han Yu-jin thought, Now that I'm up close, I can see that she's a real beauty. Stop. No, you hang. Don't even think about burning down the entire conference room. Hearing such a curious question from the head of the Destroyer Guild, Han Yu-jin said in embarrassment, This is my precious brother. I can make an exception if he becomes the best in Korea. Hearing what Han Yu-jin, the head of the Jupiter Guild, had said, Song Hyun-jae said, The best in Korea? Does that mean Jupiter can buy you right now? Hearing such a question from the head of the strongest guild in the region, Han Yu-jin was immediately stunned and clutched his pet in confusion. The Jupiter Guild is currently the strongest guild in the country, and not only is the guild strong, but its head is also the strongest hunter. This would definitely guarantee my complete safety. Han Yu-jin and the other guild leaders looked at him after he said this, and he thought, But why did you keep silent until now, and now you're speaking up? Can't you sense the atmosphere? After thinking about this, Han Yu-jin continued his thoughts. Do you have any idea what will happen here if I agree? And then he said, This exception is only for my younger brother. After saying this, Han Yu-jin added, Everyone else will need to become at least the best in the whole world for this. Hearing this, Moon Hyun-ah walked up to him from behind and began to pat him on the back and said, Ha ha ha, what arrogance! You'd rather die than join something, huh? After she finished praising him for his confidence and determination, Moon Hyun-ah added, Both the guild leader and the big brother. What a persistence in wanting to be independent. Feeling like a shrimp among whales, Han Yu-jin thought, How tense it is here. If it were not for my resistance to fear, I would have died long ago from this intimidation. After saying this, Han Yu-jin added, recalling an interesting fact about strong hunters. I've heard that all S-classes are crazy because of how often their paths crossed with death, Han Yu-jin continued as he looked at each of the people present. But how can they radiate such pressure even as they carefully watch each other, without letting the smiles from their faces go? Thinking of how difficult it had been for his brother when he became the head of the guild, Han Yu-jin thought, God, Yu-hang, how did you survive among these people? Do they even address you informally? Hugging his pet and feeling sorry for his younger brother, Han Yu-jin continued, I'm sure they were bullying you because you are so young. After hearing all of Han Yu-jin's words, Song Hyun-jae said, So that's why this rookie was so insistent on forming his own guild. He just really wanted to follow his older brother's example. Although you still look much kinder than your younger brother. Hearing these words, Han Yu-jin spoke to Song Hyun-jin. My God, what are you saying about my brother? He is much kinder than me. I would even say that he is kinder than all of you here. Hearing this, someone in the audience spoke up. Are you serious now? At this, Yujin said in surprise, E? And he thought, did I say something wrong? Thinking back to their childhood when they were just children, Han Yujin said that he could not have asked for a better younger brother than his Han Yu-hyun. Whenever Han Yu-hyun had to go somewhere, before leaving, he would run into his older brother's arms and say, I'm going, Yu-hyun. Even when Han Yu-hyun was a very young child, he always took care of his older brother, even on his birthday. When he made a card, he held it out and said, Brother, here, happy birthday. And then the two of them struck beautiful poses for the camera and had their picture taken. If you want a picture, let's take a picture together, brother. After that, there was also a moment when Han Yu-hyun was graduating from high school. His grades were all excellent, and after the final test, he said that he planned to go to medical school, earn a lot of money, and support his eldest. Continuing to talk about his younger brother, Han Yu-jin said, even though I couldn't devote all my time to taking care of him because I was always at work after our parents died, instead of becoming a rebel. Holding his pet in one hand, Han Yu-jin continued to talk about his youngest with such sincerity. He is kind, obedient, and tries not to lose heart. As he continued to talk about his younger brother, all those present could hardly contain their laughter at what they heard, and Ah Yu-jin continued, there is no one kinder in the whole world. After finishing his story, Han Yu-jin opened his eyes and saw that everyone was laughing at him, and he said in surprise, did I say something wrong? Why are you all... But everyone just pointed at him and laughed at Jin's story. Looking at the head of the Jupiter Guild, Song Hyun-jae said, I was wondering why he was being so polite today. This is why, haha. Noticing this, Han Yu-jin thought, even the head of Jupiter. Pointing to Han Yu-heng, Moon Hyuna said to Han Yu-jin, that crazy bastard is pretending to be you. Hearing this, Han Yu-jin shouted out in offense, why are you calling him a crazy bastard? Isn't it too much to humiliate him just because he is younger? Hearing this, Moon Hyuna said to Han Yu-jin, what a big brother, ha 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 ha. To which he replied, that's okay. The main thing is that he is kind to his brother. You have a very kind little brother. And wipe your tears before you say something like that, Association President. Holding out the contract to Yu-jin, Moon Hyun-ah said, thanks to you, I've had a good laugh. It's time for us to move on to the final stage of preparing the contract. Hearing this, Han Yu-jin thought, what is wrong with them? What kind of problem do they have with my brother? Handing the contract letter to Han Yu-jin, Moon Hyun-ah said, we had a very fierce negotiation before Han Nim came, didn't we? After saying this and providing information about the relationship between the guild leaders, she added, read it and tell me. Read this and tell me if you have anything to add. Hearing this, Han Yu-jin pulled the contract to his eyes to scrutinize it and reread it, and then spoke to the girl. Okay. As he reread the contract, he noticed what it said. The 5 guilds guarantee the security of Han Yu-jin and his building. Han Yu-jin agrees to give priority to the 5 guilds. However, each guild is limited to receiving 1 monster every 2 months. After reading this, Han Yu-jin said, what is this? It's talking about some kind of my building. Hearing this question, Moon Hyun-ah said, did Seok Shu-man not tell you? The head of the Hunters Association said, because you need a place to raise monsters. After saying this, the head of the association added, that is why we have decided to rebuild a building nearby for this purpose. Hearing this, Han Yu-jin shed tears and said joyfully, nice, Shimeng Juice. To roughly summarize, the terms of the agreement are as follows. The 5 guilds guarantee the security of Han Yu-jin and his household. Han Yu-jin will prioritize orders from the 5 guilds. The construction will be carried out with the investment of 4 guilds, not including the Abyss. The building will be fully owned by Han Yu-jin. After stating all the basic rules of the contract, Han Yu-jin turned to his older brother. The only thing left to do is to sign that. Hearing all the terms and conditions of the agreement and what Han Yu-jin would be granted, he could hardly contain his joy and reached out for the document. Seeing the strange Han Yu-jin, Yu-hyun spoke to him. Brother, what's wrong with your face? To which he replied, God, I'm just nervous that my muscles are just by themselves. And I thought, come on, how am I going to keep the corners of my lips down? Realizing the honor that awaited him, Han Yu-jin thought happily, I will own a building in the very center of Seoul. Remembering that he used to feel like a shrimp among whales, Han Yu-jin thought, forget the pressurizing atmosphere. I am ready to fall to the ground in front of you, dear customers. Imagining what the future held for him, Han Yu-jin was already dreaming about what awaited him, thinking, a personal building that will be under the patronage of the 5 major guilds of the country. Continuing to fantasize, he thought, I'll set up a workshop there and bring Meng Wu there. Maybe I should also try to persuade Seok Ha-young if she continues her research here instead of in America. Standing near the red carpet, journalists with microphones asked, 25-year-old building owner, Mr. Han Yu-jin. Tell us a secret. How did you manage to become a wealthy man without a college degree? Imagining him holding a glass of expensive liquor in his hands and giving an interview, I said, "Ha ha, what are the secrets? I just—" Raising the glass up and with his fiery lion on his shoulders, Han Yu-jin said, "I did my best to please my dear customers. Isn't that right?" Imagining himself already receiving millions and drinking expensive drinks, Han Yu-jin immersed himself in his sweet expectations and thought, "I will be able to provide for my retirement just by renting out the premises." After settling all the issues, all the leaders began to say goodbye to Han Yu-jin, saying, "We have to go. It's been fun today, Hinnom." To which he replied, "Ah, yes, yes. Have a good trip." As he left the conference room, the Jupiter chairman said to Han Yu-jin, "I'll keep the expulsion condition in mind. See you soon." Han Yu-jin was surprised to hear the strongest hunter in the country say that, and he said goodbye to him. "Huh? Very well." After everyone left the meeting room, Han Yu-heng went to his elder and said, "Brother." He replied, "Ah, you did a great job. I was so deep in thought that I didn't realize it was over." When the conference was over and all the guild leaders had left the hall, Han Yu-heng approached his elder brother and said to him, "You, don't pay any attention to what the other guild leaders have said about me. At least I have not done anything to disgrace me." After saying this to his younger brother, Han Yu-heng heard back, "Ha ha, what difference does it make? How can a guild leader never cause a scandal in his life?" And then, looking at his pet, he added, "Mir, you're also a great guy. You've been holding me for so long." After the dialogue with his younger brother was over, Han Yu-jin was pleased with himself, he thought, as he held the animal in his arms. The main thing is that everything went well. I couldn't have asked for better conditions. When the conference ended, it was quite late, and the stars had already risen in the sky. Looking up at the clear night sky, Han Yu-jin thought, "Ah, the world has suddenly become beautiful."